This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. Today's discussion relates to boards and CEOs. And I think this is a topic that doesn't get discussed enough in some situations. You've got this great balance with boards and CEOs, and we particularly see it with mid-sized and smaller companies, but it happen at very large companies like Disney as well. You have situations where, in the typical board situation that's working well, the board advises, oversees the recs, but the CEO and the leadership team really runs the business day to day. Periodically, you end up in situations, and Bob Iger is a great example of this when he served as sort of executive chairman at Disney and had hired a CEO to take over, or for all practical purposes, Bob kept on running the company and ultimately drove his CEO out. You have this happen in other settings where boards get so involved in running the business that they either end up running it poorly because they're not in it full time, or they end up sort of motivating or dethroning their CEO and leaders because those people don't have enough power or ability to really run the business. And this could happen for various different reasons. It could happen because you either have an overactive board, you could have a board that doesn't have a formal structure and a lot of thought to what they're doing, or you could have a board that's inherited leadership that's not the right leadership for running the company. Any of these things can drive this. It could be good reasons, it could be bad reasons. Good reasons are the board has a leadership team at the company that's not effective enough, and they feel like they have to do this. At the end of the day, from my perspective, that's almost always a short-term, not a long-term solution. It doesn't work great for the long term. Far more important for the board to realize their job is not to run the day-to-day situation, not to make every hire at the company, but rather to let leadership really do that, maybe vetted by the board. And if they're not comfortable with the leadership at the company, at some point they've got to make a change in that leadership at the company, because long term, that board really trying to run the company itself is a debacle. One of the things that's happened in the world today is, as the world has evolved and escalated, there are plenty of situations where you used to have very active boards. And that model, as businesses become more sophisticated and moves at a different velocity, might not work the way that it used to work. And so it's much more important that that board has leadership at the company day to day, full time, that's really running the company how it needs to be run. In any event, this issue of this balance of powers, this balance of authorities, and who does what between boards, between CEOs, between executive leadership, comes into focus so often at companies in size from $1 to $100 million. It seems to come into focus all the time in terms of that revenue size company, and often at a much larger size company, particularly when you've got a CEO who is long-term CEO and maybe founder who has now stepped back, but doesn't really want to step back. I mean, a fascinating situation. In any event, we hope you enjoy this and some of the thoughts here. Feel free at any time to reach out to Scott Becker, 773-766-5322, and love to visit with you on any of these issues and anything you think about. Thank you for joining the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast.